Hey guys, it's Cass. Welcome back to my channel. I feel like I was just sitting here saying that I couldn't believe that it was the end of March, and here we are. It's the end of April. It's actually May 1st to be exact, and we are in full summer mode right now. It is so warm out. I'm gonna try and get through this without having to turn my air conditioning on, but yeah, I'm here to do my April wrap up. It was a decent reading month. I didn't find any new like all-time favorite books or anything like that, but I feel like I have kind of kicked the slumpy mood that I had been in for the past couple of months, so I'm happy with that. I hope April was a great reading month for all of you. Let me know what you read this month, what your favorite was. Let me know if there was something that you absolutely hated that you read, so I know to stay away from it. And yeah, if you enjoy literary fiction, memoirs, essay collections, things of that nature, I would love it if you subscribe to this channel and joined in the conversations that we have in the comments. I love talking with you guys and getting recommendations from you. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, we're gonna get into it. I have some like housekeeping items first, I guess is what we're gonna call them. I DNF'd just for now The Passion According to GH by Clarice Lispector. I got about 60 pages into this month, and it just was not grabbing me in the way that I feel like it could if I was in the right mindset for it. So I'm gonna put this back on the shelf and I'll come back to it eventually. I didn't want to push through it when I wasn't feeling it, because I do feel like this could be a really impactful book for me, and I always see people talking about it and praising it, so I want to give it its best shot and not force myself to read it. I started 2 other books in April that I haven't finished yet. I started Zami, A New Spelling of My Name by Audre, Lorde, and I'm about 160 pages into this, and you guys, I'm not going to get into it, but I absolutely love this and more people need to pick this up. I checked this book's page on Goodreads and only 4 of my friends on Goodreads have read this, and I think that that number needs to be so much higher. So I'll talk more about this in a future video, but absolutely loving this so far. I also started La Batarde by Violette, Leduc, and this one is a really chunky one. I'm about 130 pages into it. I think it's like 600 pages, so I think this is going to take me a little while. I am enjoying this one as well. I feel like it has a lot of similar themes to Zami, which is kind of interesting. I feel like they're kind of in conversation with each other in some specific ways. So yes, I will talk about this more eventually as well. But yeah, that was like a decent chunk of reading this month that's not necessarily reflected in my wrap-up stats. So just wanted to kind of shout that out. As far as my like Storygraph stats for this month, I read 7 books, which is 2,051 pages. I had 71% fiction and 29% nonfiction. So this was a more fiction heavy month for me, which I feel like it's usually been the opposite way around so far in 2024. And I also read 4 books from the library, 2 books from my own shelves, and 1 on NetGalley. I want to start keeping track of that a little bit more. This was a big library month for me, and I love that for me and for the library, but I also definitely want to make sure that I'm reading off of my shelves because they're getting kind of out of control. Let me know if you guys would be interested in like a bookshelf reorganization video or like a bookshelf tour. I think that I'm gonna do that soon. All right, the first book that I finished in April was The Cheffe by ndiaye. This was translated from the French, I believe by Jordan Stump. He has translated, yes, he has translated most, if not all of her work into English. The glare is super terrible because of the beautiful sunshine. But I came across this on the shelf of my library when I was just walking around and browsing, and I snatched it up because I did not know that this existed. I'm relatively new to Ndiaye's work, but yeah, I had not heard of this one. So I grabbed it because it was just hanging out at my local suburban library. So this book centers around two characters. We have an unreliable narrator who is a man who's kind of getting older. He's in the depths of alcoholism and depression, and he is addressing someone. I don't know if it's like a reporter or a journalist. He's not really talking to the reader, but he does kind of have these like side comments to this person that he is telling the story to. He is telling the story about the life and the rise to fame of this female chef that he had worked for as a young man. She's referred to as the chef throughout the book, and she is someone that the narrator absolutely loves and adores, and that really comes through in the way that he talks about her. We learn little tidbits of the narrator's life, but the focus really is on the chef and on this man's like unrequited love and just admiration for her. And I feel like it's such a good example of the way that we can never truly know everything about someone, even if we love them and we're very close with them. He mentioned so many times throughout this book that he was the chef's closest friend, and he was the only person that she had ever like opened up to in her life, but there's still so much that he doesn't know about her. One of the lines that he says is, "The things I know about the chef, the things I'm telling you now, aren't things she revealed to me, they're things I think I've realized on my own." So that's kind of where the unreliableness comes in. He acts as this authority on her life and who she was, but she in actuality hasn't really truly revealed all of herself to him. So throughout the book, he's kind of struggling to uncover and untangle the secrets that she kept from him and her motivations for doing certain things in life. And yeah, we really just kind of get her life story through the lens of this man that worked for her. A lot of my enjoyment of this book, I think, came from the way that I interpreted it. I think that a lot of the talking about cooking in here could be seen as a metaphor for writing or just like creativity in general, and I thought that that was a really fun kind of parallel to draw. I wouldn't necessarily say that this book is like food writing. There are some descriptions of food, but that's definitely not the focus here. The focus is really on the way that the chef felt while she was creating her famous dishes. So many of the lines in here just reminded me so much of the way that writers write about reading and writing. One of the lines that I had picked out that kind of correlated with that was that cooking made her feel happy for reasons that came only from herself, her endurance, her boldness, her faith in her abilities, and not because someone else was trying to make her happy, which she never trusted. She wanted to owe the emotion and sensation of happiness to herself alone. And I feel like if you replace cooking with writing in that sentence, like, it works so well and it mirrors so many writers' feelings about writing. She just has this all-consuming love of cooking, and even when she's not in the kitchen, like, we see her working tirelessly through her ideas and just being creative in that sense. When she is in the kitchen, she enjoys such a profound sense of solitude and focus that really reminded me of some of the themes in A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. Like, it is the one place where she's able to just pour herself into her work and be creative and not have anyone bother her. I feel like the chef also really demonstrates this like respect for the ingredients that she uses and the process that she goes through to transform them into her dishes. That kind of mirrors the way that writers hold in really high regard like the writing process and the works that they've loved and that have kind of made them into who they are. So yeah, I don't know if maybe I was reading too much into it, but I really enjoyed picking it apart and making those connections. This was a bit different from the other Marie Ndiaye books that I've read so far. I feel like this isn't as unsettling as the other books of hers that I've read. There is kind of this theme of like secrecy, and there's some stuff to do with motherhood and like toxic mother-daughter relationships as well that I feel like was really in line with some of her other work. And I felt like the writing style in this was a bit different. It was a lot more dense, and a lot of the like what looked like paragraphs in this book, they were made up by just one sentence that was broken up by a lot of commas. So that made it kind of slow going for me at first, but once I got into it and settled into that pace, it wasn't a super big deal. I'm really excited to continue on with the works in Marie Ndiaye's catalog. I rated this 4 stars if I didn't say already. My next read was actually also related to food and cooking. It was Small Fires, an Epic in the Kitchen by Rebecca Mae Johnson, which I rated 3.25 stars. It was in between a 3 and a 4 for me. And I feel like it was very wide-reaching and expansive, but also very personal on Rebecca Mae Johnson's journey with cooking. She cooks the same pasta sauce recipe over and over and over, and there are a lot of descriptions of the different times that she's made it and the different alterations that she makes to the recipe depending on who she's with, how she's feeling, like whatever's going on in her life. And she kind of documents that, and I absolutely loved that section of it. It really reminded me of my own personal relationship with a vodka sauce recipe that I've been cooking since I was in college, and I eat once a week, every single week. It's accompanied me throughout my life. Another really interesting thing that I found in this book was the way that Johnson connected the way that we use recipes with what is called the reception of classical texts, which is basically just like how classical texts are read and translated and like reinterpreted and repurposed. Some of it was a little bit over my head. There was a lot of connections to like the Odyssey, because I believe that's what she did her thesis on, if I'm remembering correctly. I had to return the book to the library, so I don't remember off the top of my head, but she brought in a lot of other like literary examples and connected them to cooking, which I thought was interesting. I actually ended up picking up Zami by Audre Lorde because of Small Fires. Rebecca Mae Johnson quotes a passage of Lorde's talking about food that she ate on a train going to Washington, D.C., and it was kind of the catalyst for me picking up that book, because I was like, wow, the writing is really beautiful talking about food, and it just kind of put it on my radar. So really thankful for that. I've seen a lot of reviews of this that felt like some of the connections and the arguments that Johnson was making were a bit far-fetched and just like not super realistic, which I can see why people would feel that way, but ultimately I felt like it was just like a fun, interesting mental exercise in like thinking deeper about cooking. It's one of those things that like everyone has to do every single day, more or less, and I think looking at it through a more academic lens was just something different. So even if it wasn't the most like realistic, I enjoyed going on the journey, you could say. The first half of this was definitely stronger for me than the second half. I definitely felt lost at some points in the second half. This made me want to pick up some other food writing eventually, so it kind of sparked that interest. Third, we have People Collide by mcelroy. I rated this 4 stars. This was another library pickup just on a whim when I was walking around. I read this a couple weekends ago, and I just wanted something that I could sink into that had maybe a little bit more plot to it, and this absolutely fit the bill. I wouldn't say that this fits the bill of a plotty novel for everyone, but compared to some of the other books that I read, this was quite the adventure. I read this over the course of like a Saturday afternoon and evening, which I don't remember the last time that I just like sat down and read a book in more or less one sitting. So I feel like that really speaks to how well written this book is and how engaging it is. So this follows our narrator, Eli. He has left his life in the United States behind to move to Bulgaria with his girlfriend, Elizabeth. They're both writers, but Elizabeth definitely has a bit more success. And the reason that they moved to Bulgaria is because she is teaching there. One day he's getting ready to go to the school that she works at to visit her, and he realizes when he gets there that his consciousness is in Elizabeth's body, and Elizabeth's consciousness is presumably in Eli's body, which is nowhere to be found. So we have Eli mentally, but Elizabeth physically, and everyone is just kind of assuming that Eli's physical form abandoned Elizabeth. Eli kind of tries to keep the jig up by not telling anyone what's going on. He plays into this idea that, oh yeah, like Eli abandoned me, and he just pretends to be Elizabeth in that situation. Eventually, he does end up going on a journey to figure out where his partner has disappeared to. So this is really looking at the dynamics of partnership and asking why resentment builds throughout time in relationships. You know, how do we deal with envying the other person in a relationship for their success that we might not be having ourselves? How can we come together with another person and build our lives together while still like retaining our own individual identity? I was exploring a lot of really interesting questions in a really unique way, I think. One of the things that I thought was really interesting about this was that while Eli is in Elizabeth's body, their friends and their family are talking to him as if he is Elizabeth and as if Eli is gone. I'm probably making this sound so confusing, but I feel like Eli was very much characterized by the things that the friends and the family were saying. I feel like their true feelings about him started to come out, and he was maybe hearing some things that he didn't want to about himself. All these other people around him felt comfortable speaking in that way about him because they thought that he was Elizabeth. There's also obviously this exploration of gender and sexuality in here, which, you know, you have to suspend your disbelief a little bit, but it was very interesting. You know, Eli has experiences within Elizabeth's body that he never would have had otherwise, and it's a little bit like mind-bending, and just it makes you think. I felt like this was propulsive and plotty enough for me to finish in the course of a day. There is that like body switching aspect, but this never dives into like why it happened or any of the surrounding circumstances. It's just like, this is a thing and you now have to deal with the consequences of it, which I appreciated that it didn't get super hung up on those details, because I found that like unrealistic element didn't distract me. It really actually made me think about how unsettling that experience would be and how like confusing and scary that would be. So it was actually really thought-provoking. There's also a lot of really stunning language in here. I feel like Isle really has a way with like metaphors. Those were what stuck out to me the most. So yeah, I think if you're a fan of queer literary fiction that is wanting something a bit faster paced, this is the book for you. The next book that I read was on NetGalley, and that was Any Person is the Only Self by Elisa Gabbert. I rated this 3.5 stars, and I talked a bit about it in my last video of essay collection recommendations. It releases on June 11th from FSG, so thank you so much to them and to NetGalley for letting me read it early. This was an enjoyable little essay collection that I mainly read before I went to sleep each night. It was quite pleasant and like a good book for that time and that setting, I think. This is mainly essays about reading. Elisa dives into a bunch of her favorite books and the experiences that she's had with them. So that's, you know, something that's right up my alley and something that I'm always interested in. But the issue that I had with this book and what kept it from getting a higher rating was that I just felt like I wanted a bit more of Gabbert's personality and like her own opinions to shine through. Since she's talking about books that she loves, there's a lot of quotations from other books and other work, which I really appreciated the way that she was able to weave together all of these different sources. I just felt a little bit overwhelmed by it at times. I feel like there were a lot of like back to back to back quotes without her adding any additional input or like her own opinions to it. I really enjoyed and could like relate to a lot of the opinions that she did express, so that's why I was a bit disappointed, because I wanted more of what she had to say. You can just tell how much she has loved books and reading all throughout her life, but especially during the pandemic was like a big focus here. But I just felt like her opinions were overshadowed by her bibliography. My favorite pieces in this were the grouping that talked about Sylvia Plath. There was a couple different pieces about her, and then also Second Selves, which talked about people with highly autobiographical memory. So they like remember everything about their lives, and like it's really crazy because I don't remember what I did yesterday. But like you could give them a date and they can tell you all of these details about what happened on that day. So it was super mind-boggling and something that I hadn't heard of before. This was overall like an enjoyable experience, but not a new favorite for me. I'm interested in reading some of her previous work as well. I've had her on my TBR for forever, it feels like. So my next book was Great Expectations by Vinson Cunningham. I was sent this from Hogarth with a really cute hat and like really beautiful packaging and everything. So I was really excited to get to this. I rated it 3.75 stars. This is an auto-fictional account of a young Black father who is working on a senator's presidential campaign. And this is most likely mirroring Vinson Cunningham's time working on Obama's first presidential campaign. He's tackling a lot of different themes in this. He talks about race, there's a big focus on religion, he gets into fatherhood as well. And I think it's interesting because the character of David, who is a stand-in for Vinson, he is in such stark contrast to a lot of the people that he encounters while he's working on this campaign. He's rubbing elbows with some incredibly wealthy and famous donors and supporters of the campaign, and then there's also people who, you know, aren't as well off as David is, who are volunteering and working on the campaign as well. David dropped out of college after learning that he was going to become a father, and he was working as a tutor, and that was actually kind of how he got connected with the campaign, through the mother of the child that he was tutoring. And I just feel like the character of David really stood out as this like almost like refreshing, innocent person coming into this big world of like politics and wealth, and you could just see that he wasn't blinded by all of that crazy stuff. And I just feel like it was really easy to root for him and to like him as a character overall. I feel like this is a book, you know, while yes, there are some scenes with some really important people, I feel like this is mainly made up of like everyday moments, because this is ultimately a job for David. You know, it's kind of just his day-to-day life. One of my favorite and like most memorable scenes in this book was when David and his fellow staffers were at a bar, like a dive bar, watching basketball, and they ended up befriending this young bartender. It was just so descriptive, and I could picture the bar and like the conversations so clearly. I really enjoyed the like simplicity of it. I feel like Cunningham really does a great job of evoking that sense of like time and place. David does travel around for the campaign and works out of a couple different cities, and you can just really feel the vibe of like kind of, I guess, skeptical optimism that was going on at the time, like 2007, 2008. You know, it was such a big turning point in US history, and I feel like everyone was like excited about it, but also kind of like, is this gonna work out? I mean, I was like 8 years old, so I don't remember personally, but that was definitely the vibe that I was getting from the book. Besides politics, one of the other really big things in here is this culture of like religion and the church that David grew up going to. There were a lot of like religious metaphors that kind of went over my head, but I feel like he drew a lot of parallels between the like institutions and like the bureaucracy, maybe is the word that I'm looking for, of both religion and politics. You kind of have these like cults of personality and really like devout followers in both religion and politics, so I feel like that was an interesting connection to make. I think my final thing with this, I just wish that he had dove a bit more into fatherhood. You know, a lot of the books that I read deal really heavily with motherhood, and I feel like fatherhood just isn't explored as much. Maybe it's just the books that I'm reading, but I wish that his discussion of that had been a bit more overt than it was. But yeah, this was a really promising debut novel. I'll definitely be keeping an eye out for anything that he does in the future. All right, next we have The Long Form by Kate Briggs. I rated this 4 stars. This was my like lunch break book at work, so this took me almost the entire month to read. This is another debut novel, and this one was also super far-reaching and expansive, and I was really impressed by it. This book weaves together a lot of different threads, and I think that it does it in a way that does not feel disjointed. It follows one day in the life of Helen and her newborn daughter Rose. A lot of the scenes with them were really touching, you know, and very tender. We get to see those like intimate moments that they share, and we also get to see the frustration that Helen feels sometimes, just trying to figure out what Rose wants when she can't really communicate with her in words. You know, she has a lot of doubts about her ability to be a mom, which I felt like was very realistic. We even get to see kind of a peek into what Rose might be feeling as someone that is encountering the world for the very first time. I feel like there's kind of this ongoing realization throughout the book from Helen that, you know, their relationship is going to have ebbs and flows, and it's going to change, and it's not always going to be difficult, but it's also not always going to be easy, just as Rose kind of develops and becomes her own person. So while that's kind of the main storyline going on, Briggs doesn't just leave it at that. She does really short chapters in here, and they all kind of rotate through some different subjects. She weaves in literary criticism and different ideas that come from Henry Fielding's really early novel. It's like one of the first novels, I think, in the sense that we think of a novel, called The History of Tom Jones. It's the book that Helen orders and is delivered to her in this day that we're following them throughout, and she's kind of picking it up and trying to read it in between caring for Rose. There's a lot of kind of, you know, big picture questions about like the novelistic form and different modes of writing, because Tom Jones was a novel that also like worked in different like essay sections and like took you out of the story. So that's also what Briggs is doing in this. We also get a lot of flashbacks to Helen's past. She has a best friend that she used to live with named Reba or Reba. I think it's Reba because it has 2 B's, but I thought that their friendship was very sweet, and you could see the ways that having Rose kind of pulled them apart a little bit, both physically because Helen moved out into her own place, and also just, you know, they're kind of at different places in their lives, but they still obviously really care for each other, and there were some really sweet moments between Helen, Reba, and Rose, so I really enjoyed that. And then we even get a glimpse into the relationships of this delivery driver that had delivered the copy of Tom Jones to Helen and woke up Rose because he like rang the doorbell 10 times. So we kind of see what he was dealing with in his life as well. This is like a longer book. It's, I think, like 440 pages or something like that. And I was only reading it in like short little spurts on my lunch break every day. But I do think that the short chapters in here help it move along. I think that if you did just like sit down for a longer time to read this, you would get through it pretty quickly. And I found that the further along that I got in this, the more I was looking forward to picking it up. I feel like a lot of my dog ears in here and my underlines are actually closer to the end because I felt just, I don't know, it was working for me a lot more the more I read. I really enjoyed Kate Briggs's writing style when she was talking about these like little details of motherhood. And I thought that the like literary criticism, essay, Tom Jones parts were also pretty accessible. There was some stuff that didn't connect with me, but I found that I was interested in what she was talking about more often than not. There's some really like funny moments in here, there's heartwarming moments, and just some stuff that really makes you think. So I feel like this is another great book to add to the list of books about motherhood. That's another video that I need to make. That's another list that I need to write. Looking forward to reading her other book. But yeah, I'm looking forward to reading her nonfiction book about translation called This Little Art. Okay. Whew. We're on our last book here. Thank God I'm baking in the sun right now. My 7th book of April was There But For The by Ali Smith. I rated this 3 stars. I just finished this the other day and I've been having trouble kind of figuring out if I enjoyed it or not. And I think I'm leaning towards not. I'm gonna start with the positives here, which is that Ali Smith's writing style is wonderful. She really plays with language in a way that is just like asking you to read it out loud. And I felt the same way whenever I read Autumn, which is the first book of her seasonal quartet. I read that back in like the beginning of 2022, and I was so impressed with the like poetic quality of her writing. She uses a lot of like puns that have this like double meaning to them, and yeah, she's just really playing around with language, and I thought that that was a lot of fun. There's a quote from the last section of the book that I feel like really describes the way that I feel about her style. It says, Brooke looked up from her piece of paper and watched them throwing the words for birds and flowers and Hollywood actors at each other like they were throwing little rocks wrapped as presents. And I feel like that's what she does. But I think that the stumbling block for me with Ali Smith is just with the specific like stories that she tells and with the themes that she's exploring. A lot of the times when I was reading this, I felt like there was just something like right outside of my grasp. I felt like I should have been connecting dots that I just wasn't connecting, and I just didn't feel invested in the storyline. I feel like me and Ali Smith have a lot of the same like viewpoints about a lot of the like political and social themes that she often brings up in her work, but I feel like those viewpoints are usually beneath a surface of like really heavy like British politics and like this sense of humor that just doesn't fully resonate with me or like make sense to me. I think she did a good job at giving all of the main characters in here like a distinct voice and personality, but there is actually like quite a large cast of characters in here, and I felt quite lost within them, especially in like the dinner party section of this book. I had no idea how all of these like peripheral characters were connected to our 4 main narrators, and I wish that it had just been, I don't know, like cleaned up a little bit. She makes some really interesting and surprising connections between the 4 main narrators, but yeah, I don't know. I guess I didn't even really talk about what this book is about. So it's split up into 4 sections. Each one has a different person narrating it, and it is centering around this man named Miles, who locks himself in the spare bedroom of a house that he's visiting for a dinner party. And it becomes this like whole big situation in the neighborhood. Like, people really kind of, I don't know, just make him into this like legendary figure because he did this. I just never really felt super compelled to find out what was going to happen next because I didn't really feel attached to the characters. I didn't feel invested in that storyline either. It just didn't work for me. I feel like Ali Smith is obviously like a very talented writer, but I just don't know if she's the writer for me, or maybe I'm not the reader for her. I've read all of the Seasonal Quartet. This is my 5th book that I've read by her, and I thought that she was going to be like an all-time favorite author for me, but I feel like I was lukewarm on about half of the Seasonal Quartet, and same thing with this one. So yeah, I don't know what the future holds for me and Ali Smith, but yeah. All right, thank you so much for tuning in. Let me know what you've been reading. Let me know if you have any thoughts on the books that I read this month. Thank you, I already said that. I am going to get out of the sunshine and go cook some dinner, so bye.